Welcome back to another Wednesday live training. My name is Joel Evan, and I help men build unshakable marriages and deeper connection with their kids. And every Wednesday, I go live and I talk about all things that relate to making you a better man, husband, father, brother, and that includes health, mindset, wealth, everything. Because let's face it, guys, I talk about this all the time. There's no such thing as work-life balance. It's all connected. And so if you're having a problem in your career, then you can't come back and be present in your home. If you're health, if you're overweight, then it's the same thing. You don't have energy to play with your kids. And if you haven't mastered the skills in a relationship with communication, being present, and actually being able to navigate some of these sticky situations we find ourselves in as guys, then you're going to suffer. I know, because my marriage was suffering for almost 10 years where I was just really living an unconscious life. And as a high achiever, as a best-selling author, and someone that tries to aspire to be great and be better, I thought I was doing everything right. And I was wrong. I wasn't. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the ability or the know-how or the community to get me out of those situations. And I thought I had learned it all, but I didn't. And I needed to level up. And I want to give back, because I know from being and doing this work and talking to men and working with them that it's actually possible. And that fatherhood is a skill, so is marriage. And if you don't have these skills, well, then you're just going to be walking around aimlessly and not living a high fulfilling life. So that's my goal on all of these Wednesday trainings. If you have been following us for the last few weeks, we've been talking about frame control and how to win arguments and win conversations, be a better negotiator, right? And I hear this all the time. I don't know how to communicate with my wife. I always feel like I'm being bullied. I feel like I'm being pushed down. And I felt that way for years. I'm a recovering nice guy. And so I'm a passive aggressive kind of guy. And I would just shut down when it came to my wife. She would be very loud, and she would use her voice and tone of voice to really control the conversation. And I didn't know how to win it back. I didn't have these skills. And beyond that, I might have even been a leader at work, and I see that a lot with guys. They're leaders at work. They're leaders in their kids' life, on the football field or whatever they're doing, but in their home, they're just a mess. And what I found is, like, man, these skills are completely different. But if you've mastered the skills in being a great dad and leader at home, you can actually transfer them to where you are at your workplace or wherever else. So it's really cool. What we've been talking about, and just to recap, this is training 5 of 6 in how to win arguments and control conversations and control the narrative better. Just to recap, if you've missed any of the other episodes, you should definitely go back and watch them, because they are building. Every episode is building into this training sequence. The first one, we talked about your inner frame, really understanding that if you cannot manage yourself, your own emotions, your internal state, how can you have a solid foundation to actually lead and control any conversation? Because if you are angry or you are fearful or you have inferiority issues, you're immediately going to get psyched out and lose all frame control. Straight up. And then we talked about negative emotions, and that kind of bleeds into the inner frame, but we went a little bit deeper and how do these negative emotions affect the way we show up in the present. The third video is going to be on one you don't want to miss, talking about how do we control the frame or the narrative in a relationship. That was a 20-minute plus episode compared to some of these shorter episodes, so definitely go check that one out. And then last week, we talked about cultural frames, things like how status, how your speech, how the way you look fashionably, right? How laws and regulations, how social pressure can change the dynamic of a frame or the dynamic of a conversation. And it's either going to hinder you or you're going to win. And if you understand these little nuances, then you can actually win conversations, enroll others to do what you want, and also just be a more powerful, better leader. This isn't about being manipulative. This is about making you guys stronger and better men, husbands, brothers, fathers, etc., and better people, living the highest version of you. I truly believe that. So this week, we're going to talk about how do I get control back? How do I get back control of my frame if I've lost it in a conversation? We'll talk about the 4 big tactics that you can do and some of the things that people will do to derail you, and then how you can actually get them back. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Joel Evan. Like I mentioned, I am on a mission to help men build unshakable marriages and deeper connection with their kids. And I'm also a best-selling author, former first responder for 15 years. And I've been married for 12 years, been with my wife for 15, and I have 2 beautiful kids, 10 and 6, and I know this work very well. And so that is my mission, guys, to give back to you as much as I can through some of these free trainings. If you are interested, though, in joining my community of men and you are interested in joining, learning more just about my coaching and what I do, feel free to DM me or comment below and I'll reach out to you and give you the details. Also, I've just opened up relationship coaching. So couples coaching, wife and husband. My wife is taking on the women, I'm taking on the men, and collectively, we are building stronger marriages together because we know this work intimately as we've gone through all of our own struggles, and we don't want you guys to do the same. And I've seen it in the first responder world too. I think divorce is over 50%. We see suicide rates really, really high in that area. And the reason is I've seen it a lot come down because they can't manage the stress of the relationships, and that's why they're seeing it. And if they only knew that the conflict in a relationship was actually the solution, which actually heals both of you, man, you guys would not run from the conflict. You'd actually run towards it. I truly believe that, and I see that. So let's get into this week's discussion, how to take back control of a frame if you lost it. Now, here's the first tactic you're going to want to look at. Labeling. Okay, labeling is simply repeating what the person is proposing in a way that changes their position. Because once they agree with your new description of what they just said, you now control the frame. And the reason for this is by altering what they have just stated, you have simply set a new standard for the conversation. So if they ask you a question, you can ask yourself the question that you actually want to answer, which will frame the discussion in a different light. So have you ever noticed, like, politicians do this a lot? Anytime they're being asked questions, they tend to repeat the question, but they will change it subtly. And I've used this in the past with sales as well. You know, a prospect might say something like, hey, look, we're not looking for an email service provider. And you might say, or I might have said, well, you're probably not looking for an email service provider, but you are probably looking for a customer engagement platform. You see, it's just that simple shift of words that I'm using to stay in the conversation. Because right now they're trying to close it. Like, listen, I don't want solar. I don't need this. I'm not selling you this. I saw a salesman the other day doing a solar selling sales, and he said, hey, listen, are you guys interested in the new product that actually brings down your bill and you only pay $5 a month? And she said, I'm not interested in solar. He said, I didn't ask you that. I asked you, are you interested in having an electricity bill of $5 a month? And she said, I'm not interested. He said, I don't think you heard me. I'm asking you. So it sounds like you don't want the program that gives you a $5 a month electricity bill. So he was changing the conversation the entire time. She was trying to just close him off and end it. You can bring it back by repeating the question or repeating it in a different way, so that you can get your opponent to shift slightly. You hear it all the time too. I'm not pro-abortion, I'm pro-choice. I'm not against women's right to choose, I'm pro-life. And we see it again all the time. This is done in politics, and it can be used even offensively. We saw Trump do this magnificently when he was first running the elections back in 2016, and he called his opponents certain names. He called the news fake news, lying Ted, crooked Hillary, Ron DeSanctimonious, all these names, et cetera, et cetera. Now, here's the interesting thing. If someone even denies the label, they are complicitly agreeing with its usage. So if someone says to me, Joel, you're a racist, and I look and I say, whoa, look, I'm not a racist. I have plenty of black friends. I'm already giving more support to their frame because I'm responding to it. Now, in this training, we're going to be learning how to take back that frame. So in this situation, you would just simply say, hey, if you really think that's who I am, I'm not going to be carrying on this conversation. Or you can actually label them back. Ben Shapiro is a big proponent of this. If someone said to me, Joel, you're a racist, I'd say you're an idiot, or you're just throwing slurs around. But you got to be careful because this is a situation to situation basis, because you don't want to get into like a name calling exchange. And if someone's calling you names, then you've just lost all common ground anyhow. So removing yourself can be actually a great tactic. Now remember, you want to manage your own frame. You need to remain in control of your self-esteem and your self-respect. If you lose that, you can't even manage the frame of the conversation. And we talked about this in the earlier videos. So just remember, whoever's labeling the object of the conversation has the control of the frame. The second big tactic you're going to want to use is what we just talked about. Ignore them. Selective silence can actually be a really powerful shift in any conversation if done properly. The person who has ignored you, they've created what we call a validation vacuum. I went into great detail about a validation vacuum on, I believe it was not the last one, but our third training video, like how to actually take control. You're going to want to watch that one. Again, that's a bigger, longer video, about 20 minutes long, but it goes into a lot of tactics, a lot of strategies, and we talk about the validation vacuum a lot and why it's important to understand. The person who has ignored you, again, has created a validation vacuum. And this is basically where you feel like if you're not validated, then there's this enormous gap. There's this like space that needs to be filled, right? And you are the one feeling that lack, that lack of air, if you will, and you want to regain it by regaining validation. And many times we just depend on people validating us to know that we have value. And so the more validation that we receive, the easier it is to feel confident in the moment. I know that. I'm very validation seeker. That's one of my big human needs. And so when I don't feel validated, I simply shut down. Many times, though, when we perceive that someone is confident, it's just because they're always receiving validation at the time that you're observing them. And that's probably how I've ran a lot of my frames in the past. And so if you really want to see someone's true confidence, withdraw your validation and just see what happens. And we see this with a lot with guys, especially the nice guy archetype that I work with a lot because I'm a recovering nice guy, like I mentioned. We see this a lot. They're very big people pleasers and they seek validation. So when they don't get it, man, there's that lack of air, that lack of space that I'm talking about. And they're like, they got to get it back. So what do? They people please, right? And so let's just all remember a key part about confidence, status, and silence. The three things that we're just talking about now is, because they all play an act in this, is I want you to imagine what a low status individual, if that person were yelling from like across the street at someone like a Trump or someone getting out of a limousine, like some celebrity, someone of high status, and this person is just yelling at them. If a high status person actually responded to this lower status person, they would actually lower themselves to that person's frame. And the reality is, perception is reality. So even if you're not a high status person, sometimes just not responding, being silent selectively can give that appearance. And so it can be a powerful tool. Secondly, frames exist simply because people put energy into them. The reason Crooked Hillary stuck is because the news and others, they continued to respond to the frame and they fueled it. Now, when you ignore someone, they typically have one of two emotional responses, anger and anxiety. And both of these emotional states make their frame a lot weaker. So just remember, ignoring is a tool, but it is context specific. And often it's unfortunately overused by passive aggressive people, like we mentioned. The third big thing to take back control if you've lost it is humor. Because when you laugh, it's an indicator that you're in someone else's frame, which is why if you get a person laughing when they're mad, they'll be much more likely to listen to you. I've used humor so often in my relationship and I've failed and bombed using it, but most of the time because I am a person who was raised in a way that control is a good thing. And so as a dad and as a father, I look to control situations. And if my kids, for example, were like fighting me or back talking, I immediately think, crush it. Like squash that out. I'm going to stomp that out. I am the person in control. I'm the dad. You don't get to talk to me that way. And that's my natural response to this kind of act. I think most dads fall into that category. Most of us in general, right? As men. But a lot of times when I am present and I'm not so attached to the energy of what's going on and I've responded with humor, I've gotten so much farther with my kids and my wife using humor to break up things. And it makes so much sense when you start to learn this stuff. Because if you can get a person to laugh when they're mad, they're much more likely to listen to you. And humor, again, it's high risk, high reward. You know that because there's times where you've used humor inappropriately and it just completely bombed and you may not get back that frame. So you say something funny on the wrong timing, it gets even worse, right? So you got to be careful with that one too. But humor is powerful because it shows that you're able to manage tension in a pleasant way and it indicates very strong leadership. Because people can only be humorous. They can only make jokes when they don't feel a lot of stress or tension. Someone that has a lot of stress and tension, they have a lot of attachments. And as soon as someone feels the humor and laughs with you, it denotes frame acceptance because it provides such a powerful relief. No one can laugh and be angry at the same time. It's impossible, right? That was number 3. And the last one, number 4, we call the pressure flip. A pressure flip is simply the act of flipping social pressure on the person who put it on you. And it's really just a way to think of like a reframe. So they might say something like, it's your responsibility to, and I'm actually going to give you an example from when I was a first responder. I would hear this all the time from city officials and the chief of police and things like that. They'd say, it's your responsibility to keep the city safe. And so you might say instead, yeah, it's my responsibility to keep the city safe, but it's your responsibility to give me the tools I need to make the city safe. And so this last tactic, I saved it for the end because it has to be done with care. Otherwise, it just turns into this belligerent argument, right? When you pressure flip someone, it has to be measured. And that means that your tone of voice must be assertive, but it's also doesn't want to be aggressive, right? Your wife might even say to you, hey, when are you going to take out the trash? And you might try to pressure flip her and say, when you stop taking that tone with me. But then she might counter you and say, well, the reason I'm taking this tone with you is because if you actually did it, I wouldn't get so angry. Now, if you give in to their demands, you're actually rewarding that pattern of behavior, which will most likely invite them to use it again. And they're going to use it again till they get what they want. So what you might say instead is, I don't like your tone of this conversation, and just simply end it right there. That line is so powerful to say that. Remember this one. I don't like your tone in this conversation. You want to burn that line into your vocabulary and practice, because saying it, especially if people are using that aggressive social pressure flip on you, they're going to keep using it to you to get things done. So you're going to want to remember that one to kind of reframe and bring back that control to you. And what it does is it calls attention to the method that they are using to extract information. And this gives you a chance to reset things and change the terms of engagement so that you can put yourself in a more favorable position moving forward. And if they don't accept your renewed terms, well, then you now have a reason where you can implement the next tactic, what we talked about before. You can just use the ignore tactic, right? And you would just use that if they didn't accept your new terms. So just think of yourself, I want you guys to think of yourself kind of like a swordsman, right? And you've just stated to the other person that you want to use a sword in battle, but they insist on using a machine gun. And so if you continue with the fight, you're going to be putting yourself at a serious disadvantage. So rather than just continuing the fight, you're going to just reject all terms by refusing to even engage in the first place. And just remember that if someone pressure flips you back, you can also label the tone of the conversation. I don't like the tone of our conversation. But just remember, if you're in a relationship, especially with someone that you love or like your spouse, someone that you actually care for, you want to make sure that you go back after things have cooled and talk to them about whatever the subject was that was at hand. And then the final important thing I want you guys to remember and understand about the pressure flip is that they're attempting to inject emotion to encourage compliance, to get what they want. And so the way to respond to them is simply by defusing the emotion and taking a higher position, which is going to help level the two of you into a similar status. I hope this was a helpful training for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Next week, we're going to roll into the final chapter of this 6-part training series on how to win arguments, control conversations, be a better negotiator, be a more powerful, stronger leader in your home. If you guys, again, enjoyed this, go ahead and smash the like button. And if you're interested in learning more about what I do and just my story and the Limitless Fathers program I run, simply comment below or shoot me a DM and I'll get you guys the details. Have an amazing rest of your week, and I hope you are thriving.